Good morning, everybody. Ladies and gentlemen, dear colleagues, let's continue our deliberations. First of all, let me introduce myself a little bit. I have the honor to chair this second panel of today's seminar or workshop. My name is Drábová. For more than 10 years, I'm the head of the Nuclear Safety Regulatory Authority in the Czech Republic. And we partly cover in the responsibility of the State Office for Nuclear Safety, also issues connected with the agenda that is to be covered or discussed during this meeting. This panel will be devoted to one of three pillars of the so-called Prague Agenda, the pillar nuclear security. And what we will try to do is, with my distinguished panelists, to cover the challenges and possible ways forward as we see them just after a very important event, that means Nuclear Security Summit in Seoul. So it's my pleasure now to introduce our first speaker, Mr. Hahn Choong-Hee, who is a special Sherpa of the Korean Republic for the Security Summit. Mr. Hahn.
Thank you. My name is Hahn Choong-Hee. I'm a Sous-Sherpa and spokesperson of the 2012 Seoul Nuclear Security Summit, which was held March 26 and 27 in Seoul. I'm very happy to share with you the achievement and evaluation and what could be our future task ahead. And as mentioned by previous panelists, this nuclear security is one of the most important agenda put forward by the President Obama in 2009 Prague speech. And I think this is a rare success story in overall nuclear-related issues, with 2 rounds of summit in 2010 and 2012, Washington and Seoul. And we achieved, I think, a substantive, outcome. So let me explain what could be achievement, and I will explain also Seoul communique, and what is the significance of the Seoul summit, and what could be our, future task ahead of us. Let me start with achievement of the Seoul summit. Several highlights. First one is, I think, the nuclear material minimization is one of the most important tasks we have. If I highlight several specific achievements, there is a HU equivalent to around 3,000 nuclear weapons down blended in US and Russia altogether. And there is still ongoing Russia-US plutonium management and disposition agreement, which was entered into force of 2011. And if it is implemented as agreed, that is enough for 17,000 nuclear weapons. And Kazakhstan moved the spent fuels, HU 10 metric tons and plutonium 3 metric tons to new facility for long-term safe and secure storage. And from around 8 countries, total more than 500 kilograms of HU have been removed to the original country. And Sweden also returned the remaining plutonium to the United States. And in Seoul summit, 8 countries newly pledged to remove HEU or plutonium. And in Seoul communique, we agreed to announce voluntarily from participating countries on specific actions to minimize the use of HEU by the end of 2013. And also we agreed to develop options for national policies on HEU management in the framework of IAEA. This is regarding some guideline on HEU management. And this is related to HEU minimization, but we have a specific area of conversion of HEU-based reactor to LEU-based reactor. Many countries, 7 or 8 countries, pledged to convert reactors, research reactors from HEU basis to the LEU basis. And there is a 2 specific project by 4 countries, including Korea, US, Belgium, France, to test the performance of high-density LEU fuel powder developed by the ROK, scheduled to confirm around by 2016. If we can prove the performance of this new LEU high-density fuel, I think many high-performance research reactor could be converted from HEU base to LEU base. And another important project is US, France, Belgium, Netherlands, 4 countries project on the production of medical isotope, molybdenum-99, using LEU targets. Target date is 2015. Another important area is strengthening the global nuclear security architecture. We specifically put the target date for the entry into force of the amended CPPNM, Convention on Physical Protection of Nuclear Material, by 2014. So during last 2 years, there are around 34 countries ratified newly on the CPPNM, as well as ICSANCT, International Convention for Suppression of Acts on Nuclear Terrorism. I think another 15 countries pledged newly to ratify 2 conventions as early as possible. So far, I think for the entry into force of the 2005 amended CPPNM, we need 42 countries to ratify for the entry into force. I think this is very ambitious, objective for next 2 years. And 6 countries joined the GICNT, Global Initiative to Combat Nuclear Terrorism. And there is a strong support on the UN Security Council 1540 Committee, as well as a global partnership in conjunction with the G8 framework. And we emphasized the central role of IAEA, which is always important and objective, and recognizing the value of IAEA Nuclear Security Plan 2010 to 2013. And we encourage countries to increase contribution to Nuclear Security Fund in IAEA. And we welcome IAEA's plan on International Coordination Conference scheduled in 2013. And also in almost all 11 areas of Seoul communique, we mentioned the role of IAEA. And in Seoul communique, in total, we mentioned IAEA 21 times, so which signifies the central role of IAEA. Another area, I think, which draw less attention in Washington summit, but we encouraged the more active involvement of this issue, radiological material, because this radiological material is widely used, much vulnerable than nuclear material. So we encourage the countries to reflect IAEA Code of Conduct on the safety and security of the radioactive sources into their national practices. And another important and interesting area is interface between nuclear security and safety in a coherent and synergistic way. This is a new development after Fukushima accident in 2010 and 2011. So I think this is a very interesting development when you talk about nuclear security. But in Seoul Summit, we devoted discussion on this interface on the second day lunch, and more than 15 countries expressed their view, and overall view is this is right decision to include nuclear security and safety in more coherent way. Another area is preventing the illicit trafficking of nuclear materials. So we agreed to build a nuclear forensics capacity to intensify the source of illicitly trafficked materials, and we would like to encourage share the information with Interpol. And nuclear security culture is another area to educate and train all workers related to nuclear security. And also we encourage all private sectors as responsible stakeholders to engage as much as possible. Overall, 53 countries made their all house gift type of national commitment. It's more than 100 commitment. And also the commitment which was made in Washington Summit in 2010, around 35 countries made 76 commitment at the time. During the last 2 years, we achieved almost all, more than 90% of the all commitment have been made, fulfilled during the last 2 years. And let me explain briefly on what is included in Seoul Communique. In preamble part, we put also important principles and objectives and reiterate the same spirit from Washington Summit, and the importance of 3 pillars, so-called disarmament and non-proliferation and peaceful use of nuclear energy, and the fundamental responsibility of state, something like that. And next, I would like to highlight key elements in Seoul Communique. First thing is global nuclear security architecture. As I mentioned, we would like to try entry into force of the amended CPPNM by 2014. And I'd like to mention also IAEA's coordination conference in 2013. Role of IAEA is continuously emphasized. And next one is nuclear material area. We agreed to, as I said, voluntary announcement by 2013 of specific actions on HU minimization by all participating countries. We would like to encourage, convert research reactors and medical isotope production facilities from using HU to LEU, and also HU guideline, development. So this is also important area. And next area is radioactive sources. As I mentioned, this is a new attention to all participating countries to secure, radioactive sources. And the nuclear safety security interface is another area, as I mentioned. So many countries put the importance on this interface, and we encourage IAEA to further study this area, because IAEA has competence on those 2 areas. And also we put, somewhat new area of better secure spent fuel and radioactive waste. This is an interesting area. We address also spent fuel and radioactive waste because this spent fuel and waste is more, security concern. We have safety concern as well as safeguards concern. Next area is transportation security. This is a very vulnerable area for the nuclear security point of view. So Japan led a joint statement on transportation security together with Korea, US, UK, France. And also Korea, together with IAEA, will establish the GPS real-time tracking system in Vietnam as a one cooperation project for the to increase transport security. Illicit trafficking is important. We found an interesting joint statement led by Jordan for specific actions on counter-nuclear smuggling. So 19 countries joined this specific joint statement. And next area is nuclear forensics, somewhat new area, but it's very important to track the origin of the nuclear materials.
Обратите внимание, вот теперь левую сторону этой большой площади украшает здание. Чернинский дворец.
It's a public announcement. Okay, so we need to build a nuclear forensics capacity, and Netherlands will also lead this area. And the security culture is important because many countries, more than 10 to 15 countries, pledged to establish Center of Excellence for training and education for their domestic expert, and also to invite regional expert. So 24 countries joined the US-led joint statement on the nuclear training center. And information security is another interesting area led by UK with a joint statement. UK led already one seminar on this issue, and they will continue to lead. More than 31 countries joined this joint statement. And international cooperation, we emphasize the importance of support to the country in need, the country who have a strong motivation but do not have a resource. So I think we should continue to support those countries. And finally, we welcome the submission of the national report, national progress report. So far, 49 countries submitted their national progress report. I think it's very important development. And then we will continue our discussion in 2014. Another summit in 2014 in Netherlands to continue the momentum of highest political impetus. So what is the significance of the Seoul summit? I firstly will say that we successfully maintained the highest level of commitment or impetus to nuclear security. This momentum will continue in 2014. And we prioritized 11 important tasks under the Seoul communique, together with some target date in the entry into force of the CPPNM, and also submission of voluntary announcement of minimization of HEU by the end of 2013. And we put almost all important areas on nuclear security, like nuclear materials, radiological materials, and spent fuel and nuclear waste, as well as nuclear facilities. And as I said, the progress report is a very important element to check their accomplishment and implementation. So this is a de facto implementation review mechanism. I think that this practice will continue to the next summit in 2014. And I mentioned briefly several areas led by one specific country, like transportation security and information security. Total 7 or 8 specific areas, were led by one specific country. I think this is a new model for nuclear security cooperation. This is one country will draft and joint statement, and then many countries can subscribe and associate that particular project. So I think this is very flexible and then resilient, to achieve a specific objective. And one final thing, the significance of this nuclear security summit is, as we mentioned in previous panel, we have different pillars of non-proliferation and disarmament and peaceful use of nuclear energy. But in Seoul Summit, even though we are focusing on nuclear terrorism prevention, more than, I think, 14 or 15 countries mentioned when their statement and intervention, they put the importance of disarmament, nuclear disarmament, the world without nuclear weapons. And also, several countries also mentioned the importance of CTBT and fissile material cut-off treaty, and several countries also mentioned the non-proliferation issue of North Korea, something like that. So this means that I think only successful forum on nuclear-related issue, like Seoul Nuclear Security Summit, could be a confidence-building measure on nuclear-related issue, can also encourage discussion, on other areas of nuclear matter. All those, official and related documents could be found on an official Nuclear Security Summit website, www.nuclearsecuritysummit.org. Let me briefly mention Korea's contribution in preparing this summit. We ratified the 2 conventions in December 2011, and we established one independent new Nuclear Safety and Security Commission under the presidential office, and we committed contribute 1 million to IAEA Nuclear Security Fund. We decided to receive IPAS mission, International Physical Protection Advisory Service by IAEA. And also we started construction of a Center of Excellence for Training and Education in March this year, and will open in 2013. And we participated in Korea, US, France, Belgium joint project on the high-density LEU, and we undertaking the project with Vietnam and IAEA on the real-time radiological material tracking system. So let me briefly mention the final part is future task. We have to implement the agreement we set up in Seoul Summit on the national specific commitment and the joint statement, as I mentioned, in 7 and 8 area, and then all element in the Seoul communique. And we have to increase transparency and outreach activities. We did first important outreach activity last week in IAEA to all members of IAEA to say that Nuclear Security Summit is not contradictory or in conflict with what IAEA is trying to achieve. So we are just helping, and then complementary way to support what IAEA is trying to achieve. And then we will continue to our outreach activities like this, and then in Kuala Lumpur in this week, in that region, in the Southeast Asia, and also we will go to the UN in next few weeks to explain all members of the IAEA. This nuclear security area is quite not that much advanced and then much experience compared to safeguards and safety, as Mr. Mrabin will say soon. And so we have to encourage to make some standards or common rules to be applied to all member countries. And also we need an efficient review mechanism and peer review or mandatory review. In that sense, I said, a national progress report, which was done by more than 49 countries. And also we put all those national progress report in our official website, so that everybody can compare the progress of each country. And also, I think personally, IAEA IPAS service, International Physical Protection Advisory Service, is good. Certification or de facto certification to the countries whether that country has competence or capability on nuclear security. And also we have to develop long-term global nuclear security governance or architecture, because there are several nuclear security related mechanisms like two conventions and 1540 committee and GICNT and global partnership, and also IAEA and United Nations. So how we coordinate those mechanisms, or we have to create one big umbrella type of mechanism. So this is an open question we have to address in the future. Okay, so thank you. And this is really challenging work by the Republic of Korea, but with the help of all participating countries, we successfully concluded, with the Seoul communique and many specific national commitment and joint statement. We are very happy to see this result, but I think this is a halfway, and we have to continue to our work in the future. Thank you.
So thank you very much, Mr. Hahn, for your comprehensive overview of the achievements of the Seoul Nuclear Security Summit, and also for the overview of tasks that are ahead of all the nuclear safety and security community. Our next speaker is Mr. Khammar Mrabin, who is the Director of the Office of Nuclear Security of International Atomic Energy Agency in Vienna. So, Khammar, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Dana. Excellencies, distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon to all of you. Well, let me first of all join the previous speakers in sincerely thanking the Foreign Affairs, the Minister of Foreign Affairs, and also the Institute of International Relations for this excellent arrangements for this important event. My presentation will be a little bit different in its form and also in its content. I mean, the content, of course, it's a little bit more technical to talk about what the International Atomic Energy Agency has been doing and will be doing to improve nuclear security globally. But also in its form, it's a PowerPoint presentation, and I see that because there are many young, bright students here, and of course, in addition to the eminent, mature, and wise diplomats. So I hope that the only difficulty I will have that is too far, there is no remote control, so it will be hard for me to follow exactly where I am. Anyway, let's start. What's next? If we can please have also, yes, thank you very much. If not, I have nothing in front of me. Well, let me go back, please, to what really I wanted to cover. It's first to provide you with some background about what we are doing to reach a common understanding. All what we have been doing is part of what we call Global Nuclear Security Framework. That Global Nuclear Security Framework you see on the screen, unfortunately I have no control, so the first layer, which is the foundation of such the global nuclear security framework, is that the responsibility of each country, that it's the ultimate responsibility for nuclear security rests with each member state. And there you see that each country has to have an adequate infrastructure for nuclear security, including the regulatory, of course, authorities, the competence authorities, the technical support organization, education and training, law enforcement, think tanks, and other stakeholders. This is the responsibility of each country, and this cannot be delegated. Second layer of this global nuclear security framework is what you see on the top, where you have conventions or international instruments. These are binding conventions like the physical protection of nuclear material that has been mentioned by Mr. Hahn, and also there are other conventions, binding conventions that like the UN Security Council resolutions 1540. But there are also other international instruments that are not binding, they are politically binding, and like the Code of Conduct on Safety and Security of Radioactive Sources. Between the national infrastructure and the international instruments, this is what the International Atomic Energy Agency has been doing, is to establish standards or guidance that are the reference globally for what we mean by nuclear security, and also the objectives and recommendations that each country can follow to establish an adequate infrastructure for nuclear security. But also on the right side, we do help member states, cooperate with member states in establishing their infrastructure. And we do this by providing education and training to many young, of course, employees and staff. And also we provide, upon request from member states, peer reviews. And I think Mr. Hahn has mentioned this international physical protection advisory services. In few words, these are peer reviews that member states request to check the effectiveness of their nuclear security system, of their physical protection system. And this is also important not only for the country to improve its nuclear security, but also to demonstrate to the others that they have an adequate nuclear security, and system. So, next, please. Now, how we link this? I think you're going too fast. Would you please go back? Each time, go back, please. So, the last one, it's only you see at the middle, we are promoting knowledge networks. We are trying to put professionals together to share experience and lessons learned on nuclear security. And this is how the whole system we are trying to really work. Now, next, please. Now, let's concentrate on what we have been doing. As mentioned earlier, safety and safeguards, these are functions of the International Atomic Energy Agency for decades. And of course, the International Atomic Energy Agency has a lot of experience in those fields. Nuclear security, although we have been dealing with physical protection since the 70s, the nuclear security as of today has been streamlined after the nuclear, of course, attacks, terrorist attacks, in the United States in 2001. As a result of that, the first nuclear security plan has been established in 2002 for the period 2002-2005, and this has been followed by another nuclear security plan, and now we are implementing the third nuclear security plan for 2010-2013. Next, please. Now, in a few words, if you don't mind, if you allow me to go and control the system myself. What we have here is that the objective of the current plan we have for nuclear security for 2010-2013 is to contribute to the global efforts to improve nuclear security globally. And we do this with our member states, and upon the request, we establish, yes, thank you very much, we establish standards and guidance. So, it should be, yes. we establish standards and guidance, and also we provide for the application of such standards. Now, to illustrate what we are doing within this plan, we have 4 elements of our program. I will only quickly go through these 4 elements that you have an idea about what we are doing at the International Atomic Energy Agency. First, we have what we call needs assessments to help member states to assess their infrastructure for nuclear security, and by doing that, to identify what is needed and where they need support and cooperation with us. The second element is our contribution to the global security framework, how to enhance the global nuclear security framework worldwide. And third is to provide nuclear security services to our member states, and again, upon their request. And this we do for both developing countries and developed countries. Last but not least is we help countries reduce the risk, the legacy they have. There are many installations, there are many nuclear power plants, research reactors, millions of radioactive sources used in medicine, in industry, in research, and such sources, such material has to be protected against malicious acts and nuclear terrorism. So, few concrete elements of what we do. For the first element of our program, we are trying to help our member states in a systematic manner to establish a plan with them, to agree on what should be done by them and where we can cooperate with them. We have so far 60 plans for each country where improvements are needed, where cooperation is needed to improve nuclear security. But we are far from what is needed. We need more than other 60 plans with other countries to improve nuclear infrastructures. We have also what we call ITDB. This is illicit trafficking database, where countries are sharing with us any events or any incidents on nuclear security to share lessons learned and also experience how to improve security globally. So far, we have 113 countries participating in such database, but as you heard, there are, of course, more than 113 countries worldwide. Camille has mentioned, more than 190 countries have to be, hopefully, one day participating in such illicit trafficking database. And we have also a system, a platform, where we're trying to promote cooperation and sharing lessons learned and experience between all the countries concerned. Now, let me also, under the other elements of what we are doing of our program, is to promote the international legal instruments. We have what we call the Convention of Physical Protection of Nuclear Material, and also its amendment that has been, it's not yet entered into force, but the amendment was approved in 2005. Unfortunately, we have only 40 contracting parties that have entered this amendment, and we need more. We have more than 50, and we need more than 40 countries for the amendment to enter into force. And I am sure if there are questions about such amendment and its importance later, I will be happy to provide more details. But there are other conventions that are, of course, that entered into force, but there is need for improving the whole system, of these international instruments. Now, coming back to what we offer our standards, I think this is important because there is only one reference, one benchmark for all the standards and guidance for nuclear security. And this is what we have been doing. So far, we have 20 or 17 publications that are available in different languages. And also, we are working on more than 30, guidance and standards that would be the reference for nuclear security worldwide. There are also many research contracts that we are doing with our member states, but because of shortage of time, I'm not going to cover all of them. One thing that happened recently, which is very important, such standards and guidance that we have been establishing now, and this has been decided only last month, that our Director General has created what we call a Nuclear Security Guidance Committee open to all experts from member states, meaning that such standards will be established with the member states in a consistent and systematic manner, so that all countries have one reference, and then we will not only establish standards, but countries will have facilities and no difficulties in implementing them. So this is something that is very important, that all the countries now are contributing to establishment of such standards and also using them. Now, let me give you also some concrete examples about the services we are doing. We are providing services like my colleague has before said, IPAS. This is a system that has been, a service has been requested by member states to assess the effectiveness of their nuclear security systems. And I'm very happy to tell you here that last year, several countries having mature nuclear power programs have requested such service to check the effectiveness of their system, and these are France, UK, and Sweden. For this year, United States of America has also requested such service to go and check the physical protection and the nuclear security of one of their installations. At the same time, South Korea, as you heard, has requested such service, Australia, and so on. This means that more and more such services will become de facto the norm, that countries will ask the International Atomic Energy Agency, with peer reviews to check the effectiveness of their nuclear systems, and this would contribute not only to the improvements of nuclear security, but also as a building, confidence, measure among all the countries. So these are only some statistics of the services we have provided. Now, let me another service, because I see here many young students, and I think this is very important for all of you. When it comes to education and training, this is what we have also done, that there are more than 30 different nuclear training packages that are available in different languages, that I encourage you to visit our website and try to learn about this and interact with us. We have so far trained more than 10,000 persons, from 100 states, and through 400 training events. We have also created a sort of a network between education, institutions, universities, and you see here that such international nuclear security education network has been created since 2010, where we have 42 participants from 21 countries, 26 universities, and they started now delivering master degrees in nuclear security. And I think this is important for all of you to know that such diploma will be delivered on nuclear security issues. Also, we have created another network for centers of excellence. My colleague has already mentioned this, and now more and more countries are participating in such network of center of excellence. And you see all the regions here are represented, and either they have a center or they are embarking on the establishment of centers of excellence. Well, risk reduction, we have done also a lot, but this does not mean that there is nothing to be done. Nuclear security is work in progress. Still, there are a lot of things to be done. You see here, for example, more than 4,700 radioactive sources, were secured in 35 countries. And I think this is very, very important. More than 1,040 kilograms of research reactor fuel has been repatriated and made more secure. There are also many, you see here, many instruments and also many capabilities made in our member states. And we do also help countries organizing major public events to make them secure. And as an example, this year in Europe, in Ukraine and Poland, we have been working with them so that such events, when major public events where a lot of people, this will be attracted by a lot of people, that such event will be secure. And I think this is also very important. Now, having mentioned a little bit, made a lot of publicity about what we have been doing, then what is the future, the way forward, our future priorities? I said what we would like that all member states, we would like them to participate in this illicit trafficking database so that we can learn from each other and we can improve nationally, regionally, and globally nuclear security. Our aim, at least to have 153 countries participating in such database. We would like also to have, for each country receiving assistance from the International Atomic Energy Agency, to have a plan on nuclear security to improve in a systematic way and continuously improve their nuclear security infrastructure. So we need to have at least 120 plans. We also would like to have self-assessment methodologies used by all the countries. We do not want to promote a culture of assistance. We want is self-sustainable development and maintenance of nuclear infrastructure. We would like also, again, for the future, and this has been mentioned, that there will be an important conference next year, where we would like all stakeholders, all partners from the UN, all member states, all countries participate in such conference, and hopefully, again, this will promote global nuclear security. And we would like also to have more coordinated research for the prevention, detection, and response of nuclear security, and also to have a sufficient number of standards and guidance on nuclear security. Now, we also would like to have this nuclear security guidance committee that has been created, that it should be really functioning, that all the countries are contributing to this, and also that the amendment of the CPNM that, as mentioned by my colleague before, will enter into force in 2014. We're here strengthening our services. What we would like is that all our services are de facto used by all the countries, and I think this is for the reasons I have already mentioned earlier, and that also that we continue working together to reduce the risk by upgrading physical protection facilities in all the countries, and also by introducing nuclear security, at the design level, at the construction, for example, of nuclear power plants, rather than backfitting or improving existing installations. So we want to deal with nuclear security at the design level. So in conclusion, I want, of course, I skipped a little bit some because I didn't want to be too long. What really we believe that nuclear security, as has been mentioned by the previous speakers, this is a global threat that requires global response. And we believe that with 153 member states of the International Atomic Energy Agency, that we have the platform for international cooperation in nuclear security, and then we are committed to promote global nuclear security. Of course, this global role, as mentioned earlier, this recognition also by the Nuclear Security Summit, by the Board of Governors of the International Atomic Energy Agency, and also the General Conference, recognize this leading role and this coordinating role globally. To achieve that, of course, there are some prerequisites. One of them, or the main one, is to have sufficient resources, predictable resources, to achieve the growing needs for nuclear security. To give you an example or to illustrate where we are, our program for dealing with 153 member states when it comes to nuclear security, this program relies on a budget based on voluntary contributions of more than 80%, meaning such budget has a lot of conditions attached to it. So you cannot do what you plan, you have to adjust to what you receive and the conditions attached to such extra resources. So I think this is one thing where really we believe, as mentioned earlier, a lot of commitments were made during the last summit in Seoul, which is very important, and we are thankful for all the countries for the excellent results of such summit. But I think we have to think step by step to regularize such budget and have predictable resources that would allow all of us to achieve this common goal of effective and sustainable global nuclear security for all. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Khammar, for your detailed description of the agency's activities in the field of security, and also for summarizing the vision of the agency for years to come. It will be really very important not to have the importance and the role of the IAEA underlined in the various documents and papers, but to put it into day-to-day life. So I wish you well in this. Our next speaker is Mr. Václav Bartuška. Václav is Ambassador at Large for Energy Security at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of the Czech Republic. Václav, please.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. No PowerPoint from me, just a few ideas or thoughts. Two on the challenges we face and some of the possible way forward with non-proliferation. The challenges I see, one is the global one, which is nuclear weapons bring you prestige and respect, period. And many countries in the world either seek them or would like to seek them precisely for this. And no amount of diplomatic smooth talking will change this fact. I think if you look at countries like Iran or North Korea, they would not get 1/100th of the interest they got in the world if they did not have nuclear programs. So I do not expect that this topic will vanish. I think those of you who have job in nuclear non-proliferation, you have job for life and for many lives in forward. So that's one thing. The topic is here to stay. The second challenge I see is mostly for the Western countries, and that is that our role in the process is most likely to diminish in years to come, which might come as a surprise to you because so far much of the global architecture in non-proliferation was designed by US and its Western allies. And that's going to change most likely because we are losing the nuclear know-how and capabilities pretty fast. And let me use here my experience from the nuclear tender, which I oversee in this country right now, to explain more precisely what I mean by this. Up until 20 years ago, if you would look at the makers of the kit, the nuclear stuff which you need for both peaceful and possible military use of nuclear, you would come to a handful of countries which could provide you with such a kit. That's no longer the case. There are much more makers. And secondly, many of the companies in the West which used to make this stuff stopped doing that. That's basically because much of the West stopped building nuclear power plants, which is the most usual useful and peaceful use of nuclear. And secondly, because the public in the West became much more aware of nuclear and much more unfriendly to it. You know, we're sitting in a country which is vehemently pro-nuclear. 70% of the public is pro-nuclear, and we can afford to have nuclear tender at the moment and talk about building new nuclear power plants, but it's highly unusual in Europe, or indeed in the West. So the reality now is that we have this shift which is happening, and it's actually quite interesting if you look at the numbers, because some countries which up to now are the major players in non-proliferation and are major players also in the nuclear science and nuclear field will most likely cease to be such players in next decades. The numbers are pretty interesting. If you look at Germany, Germany has up until now 17 nuclear reactors. Most likely they will have none in use in 10 years' time. Britain is closing down 18 of the 19 reactors it has, so vast majority in this decade, because those are the old gas-cooled reactors. Japan is, well, God knows what. It had 54 reactors on March 11th last year. It now has 50 usable, without Fukushima Daiichi, 4 reactors. Out of these 50, only 1 is presently at use, and it will be shut down temporarily on May 5th, in 3 weeks' time. The possibility of restart the reactors in Japan is a big question. I just returned on Sunday from Tokyo, and there is no more political debate than this one. So let's see what happens there. It might go both ways. Probably only the US and France are the stalwarts of nuclear in the West, plus a handful of medium-sized countries like Sweden or Czech Republic or Finland. But that's not really that impressive if you look at the global picture. At present, EU has 143 of the global 450 reactors. With American 104, that gives the West a clear majority in the global amount of reactors in use. That will be gone in 10 years' time. Accompanied with it is pretty fast loss of know-how and scientific capabilities in the West, which is accompanied by this. It's logical. If the field is dying in one area, it's quite unlikely that young scientists will not be attracted to it. I'm sorry for it, and I know you don't like this topic, but more than 50 years ago, Karlsruhe in Germany created the famous Karlsruhe nucleate chart, which is the Bible of anybody in nuclear science. I pretty much doubt that Karlsruhe will be able to do a new edition 10 years from now. If they will be able to keep that, God bless them. That's good for them. But I see the companies which we have in the tender, I see their suppliers in the West, and I see, in general, a major shift of companies away from nuclear. The Siemens was one of the big players who did that last year, but you can see it also among the medium-sized makers. They basically all tell you, nuclear for me is 10% of the turnover or less, but 90% of my worries. Why should I worry with it? And given the instability and unpredictability in Europe, especially now, when you don't know what the next framework will be for peaceful use of nuclear, how will the insurance scheme look like? How will the responsibility for possible malfunction look like? It's quite likely that many companies which still at least claim to be in nuclear business will simply decide to move to something, well, less prone to litigation, let's put it this way. So you will see more likely that makers of the kit, of the nuclear kit, including the one with dual use, will be in countries like China, because simply they don't care that much about litigation, at least so far. So those two changes I see. One, that nuclear is attractive. Nuclear bombs are status things. And second, that the West is losing much of its know-how pretty fast. The way forward, well, I'm not expert on this, luckily. I just deal with small things like nuclear power stations. I think it will be a mixture of sweets and punishments. There are three major successes in non-proliferation. 3 cases of countries which either already had nuclear bombs or were pretty close to it and gave up voluntarily. And all 3 examples are examples of situations where the countries in questions felt secure and safe enough or dramatically changed their international position and decided to drop nuclear. Those 3 cases are, the biggest one is Belarus, Ukraine, and Kazakhstan, which gave up nuclear stockpiles after 1991, after dissolution of Soviet Union. This is by far the biggest achievement which I can see after the demise of Soviet Union, when Russia with the US together gave security guarantees and money to Belarus, Ukraine, Kazakhstan to give up nuclear weapons they had on their territory. A major success which I think until now doesn't have any parallel. Second case of a country which already had nuclear bombs and its own indigenous program and gave it up is South Africa, which had nuclear program pretty successful about the 1980s. And then in the process of transition to democratic rule, the white minority decided to completely dismantle the program and destroy it, which you can read 2 ways. One, that the whites didn't want to give the blacks nuclear bomb. Second, that South Africa did not feel really endangered by its surroundings anymore. It didn't feel like a front state anymore. It was in transition to democracy, to majority rule. And today South Africa is really the engine of much of Africa. It's not the enemy implanted there. It's a natural part of much of Africa. And the third case is Brazil, Argentina, which the 2 countries were probably pretty close in their research. And once the juntas were gone away and democratic governments came into force, they didn't feel any need to build up nuclear stockpiles. And Brazil decided that it's much more interesting for them to become really a powerhouse of Latin America economically, and they managed that. So those 3 cases I see of countries which basically genuinely felt secure and therefore dropped nuclear ambitions. Judge for yourself if other countries we know of which are trying to get nuclear weapons feel the same level of self-security or fulfilled ambitions. I'm no expert here, but I doubt it. That's about all I have to say. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Václav, for your contribution. It was almost exactly what I expected from you, because I know that you are able always to bring a fresh look on the topic and to point out the challenges which could be obvious but are not so obvious in reality. So for me it was really a good example of how interconnected the nuclear field and various aspects of nuclear field safety, security, safeguards are, and what are really the challenges that are common to all nuclear field in this, it's a modern world, holistic approach. Thank you very much once again. Our last but not least speaker is Jason Tierney, head of the CBRN security team from the Counter-Proliferation Department, Directorate for Defense and International Security, the Foreign and Commonwealth Office, United Kingdom. So, Jason.
Thank you very much. Really, I'm delighted to be invited to speak here, such distinguished company, at such an important conference. I've been asked to speak for about 10 minutes or so about nuclear information security. This was the topic that the UK led ahead of the Nuclear Security Summit. Now, Hahn Choong-Hee has already explained the importance of this work. Sorry, I couldn't see it on that screen. Would you mind going back here? Thank you. The importance of this work, and I really would like to express our sincere thanks to the government of the Republic of Korea and, of course, to the US co-chair for their tremendous support to the UK during this process. I'd echo the thanks also to the Czech Republic Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and particularly to Minister Schwarzenberg for his kind words in Seoul that supported this work quite tremendously. Now, my talk has three parts. Very briefly, the first part is, what is this work, nuclear information security? Why is it so important? Where are we now? What have we achieved, our accomplishments? Next step and challenges. It's no surprise that in anything that involves summits, conferences, action plans, there's going to be a lot of detail, and it'd be very easy to fill this with an awful lot of detail. I'm going to pull right out of that and focus on the concept, the idea of nuclear information security. I've been working on this quite closely for the last 2 years from the Washington 2010 summit, and my team has been responsible for driving this work on behalf of the UK. And there's one thing that we learned very, very quickly. If you cannot explain the idea, if you cannot explain the concept, the detail is irrelevant. So with your permission, I will focus more on the higher level, and please follow up with questions afterwards. So I want to begin with why this work is so important. You see up here 3 reasons why it's a priority. There are many reasons. You've heard many reasons why nuclear security is a priority, and information security is a priority for the same reasons. We focus on 3. The one straightforward reason is that nuclear materials and technology are spreading, and that's not an accident. NPT signatories are committed to ensuring the benefits of peaceful nuclear power are accessible and shared in a responsible manner. Secondly, more countries are likely to need nuclear power going forward. Some countries have decided not to. That's their sovereign right. The UK believes that nuclear will be part of our fuel mix for the foreseeable future. And back to the top one, the catastrophic consequences. This is really how the UK measures our response against all threats to the UK, conventional, non-conventional. We base it on a risk assessment of consequences. A nuclear attack, an IND attack against the UK or UK interest is right up there in the top right-hand box of red, red, red. So our response, therefore, is lots of risk mitigation. So this means that together, we have to ensure that as this nuclear material and technology spread continues, we're keeping our people and our interests safe and secure. But of course, information is spreading even faster. Like nuclear energy, modern communications bring us huge benefits, but they also bring big risks. There's more information about nuclear weapons and design on the internet now than ever before. But what do we actually mean by nuclear security, information security? As you've heard, when we've been discussing the summit and we've been discussing President Obama's 4-year effort, We're doing quite well on what you might call locking down nuclear material. We also need to focus on the information that terrorists need. The information to obtain and to use those materials. Maps of nuclear sites, designs for improvised bombs, how to get past border security, how to beat emergency response teams. We have to make sure, for example, that sensitive documents are properly protected. Make sure that staff working in sensitive areas are assessed for personnel reliability. Raise awareness amongst scientists, not only about the potential dangers inherent in their knowledge, but about the important role they have working with them on raising awareness on responsible science. You see here, this is how we've broken it down, straightforwardly. Acquire fissile material, turn it into a device, transport it. This gives you a very simple but effective framework for understanding what type of information needs to be protected. And this is how we, the UK, began, seriously, developing our summit work on information security. There are many ways you could represent this. Think about it from the terrorist perspective. There's information at each stage that would allow you to achieve any of those three things. And when you start thinking about it this way, again, the ideas, the examples will come to you very quickly. We've fleshed out a few here. Please don't worry about the detail. All this stuff is available, we have it, we can send it out, we have papers, we have short guidance, so it's more for information. I've explained very briefly the essence of what this work is about. I want also to explain very briefly what it is not about. This is quite important. This work that the UK is leading on nuclear information security is not about censorship. It's not about stopping or preventing the right to peaceful uses, certainly not about restricting scientific or academic freedom or anything like that. It is, like nuclear security, primarily designed to keep us safe and secure. So that's part one, what this work is and why it's so important. Part two is a very brief look at where we are now, and I must focus on the nuclear security summits. The first summit in Washington put nuclear information security very firmly at the top of the international agenda. You see here, this is from the relevant paragraph in the 2010 summit communique. From here, we had two challenges. Turn this brief but crucial reference into a more comprehensive political agreement by Seoul 2012, and then turn this political agreement or commitment into something practical and meaningful. So if we look at the political side, let's look at what we achieved by Seoul. Again, please don't read this. It's just to convey the sense of what that small operative paragraph turned into. This was the paragraph on nuclear information security in the 2012 summit communique. Para 12, for those who are interested. 53 world leaders agreed this excellent communique and this even more excellent paragraph on nuclear information security. And many, many countries helped us, the UK, in leading our work, to get here. We got, in 2 years, a para that we had to fight, a reference we had to fight quite hard for to get into the 2010 summit communique to this agreement, 53 world leaders. But of course, we still have to turn this into something practical, something meaningful. Now, to do this, the UK sponsored a multinational statement on information security, nuclear information security, and it proposed 4 broad areas. These were around strengthening national measures, improving security culture, working with science, industry, and academic communities, and working closely with key partner organizations and countries, including, of course, IAEA. The statement also proposed a number of key actions or activities that countries might like to carry out to demonstrate support for this work. This would turn this commitment into action. Countries didn't have to do all 12. Just one was enough to join the statement. We're delighted, very delighted, that 30 countries ahead of the summit chose to join us, chose to sign up. We've had interest since the summit as well in other countries that would like to join. To help this explanation of what this work was about, the UK also provided a very short one-page summary of the work that we ourselves had done against this. And as I mentioned before, all this information is unclassified, it's available to all. We have electronic copies that we can distribute to anyone that's interested. But we have quite a good, we think, example of the importance of information security, what countries might like to consider at national and international level to drive this work. And then the UK has presented its own examples of where we think work is relatively straightforward to achieve quite quickly. And there's examples around professional standards, awareness raising, education, working with industry, for example. So that's part two, a brief summary of where we are now, what's been accomplished, now the challenges and next steps. This is always the difficult one. Challenges are always different depending on the country, depending on your perspective. But here's a few that are top of my mind. How do we ensure that this work has relevance and momentum beyond the Nuclear Security Summit? Are we making best use of the huge range of multilateral initiatives out there? For example, the Global Partnership work on scientist engagement, indeed the future of the Global Partnership. UNSCR 1540, it's renewed, 1977. The EU Centres of Excellence has a reach that other bodies might not. And of course, the Global Initiative to Combat Nuclear Terrorism, which works at the very practical end of combating nuclear terrorism, has produced recent guidance on nuclear detection architecture and forensics. All of this has some relevance. The IAEA, of course, will be central to all of this, ratification of the ACPPNM. Going beyond governments, how to work even better with the non-governmental sector. This is essential. We need to balance security and openness. This tension is a very, very healthy tension from our perspective because it allows a good, frank, open discussion, and we as government are continually tested and asked to explain where, why, and how we set the red line on what cannot be released. And I quite welcome that challenge. But all of this means effective coordination and resource, particularly when we start going beyond fissile material. We start looking at radioactive sources. And where do you set that threshold? And lastly, utterly important for a government official, particularly for our paymasters, is how do we know if our efforts are succeeding? How do we evaluate? How do we evaluate in a way that makes sense, not just to our government and our treasury, but to the public? So to conclude, the 2010 and the 2012 summits confirmed, cemented the importance of this work. Information security is a key part of nuclear security. And while the UK is delighted to have been leading this work, we're under no illusions that there are still quite significant challenges ahead. So the summit renewed our drive. It acted as a catalyst for political will, for resource. Our central goal remains safety and security of our people, not impeding legitimate peaceful uses, working together to ensure that a nuclear terrorist attack never happens. That, for us, is really the core central tenet of this work. So thank you very much for listening.
So thank you very much, Jason, for your contribution dealing with very important, not new, but not so old topic in a nuclear security field, that means the information security, as you have also in your slides, Czech Republic was from the very beginning an active contributor to this, and we gladly co-sponsored this part of declaration. And we really found it as a very, very important part of overall framework of nuclear security with growing importance because of the development of information society, of course. This concludes the presentation from the presentations from the part of distinguished panelists.